What's up, guys? Ricardo Almeida here with another edition of the Ricardo Balea podcast. This is episode 14. And before we get talking to today's guest, if I can ask you once again, give me a like on the bottom of the video here. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. I got a lot more cool podcasts coming your way, a lot more classic matches, breakdowns, and a lot more cool content related for jiu-jitsu and grappling. But let's get right to it. Today on the podcast, we have a guy that, you know, is kind of an inspiration because he's one of the guys that was on the front line, fought in the first ADCC, fought in Pride, fought in the UFC, fought in the beaches of Rio, probably, you know what I mean? Has a badass nickname, way better than mine. Cachorrão, Ricardo Almeida, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ricardo, man. It's awesome being here.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, like I said, you're one of the guys that you've really kind of laid it on the line from the beginning and all different combat sports. And, you know, you're fighting at the highest levels. So there's certain people out there, and I feel like everyone's got an opinion, but like a guy like you, it's Bible. You know what I mean? It's like it's whatever you've done it all. You've competed at Worlds, you've competed at Abu Dhabi. So anything you have to say about jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, like I'm gonna take it as, you know, what's legit, and I'm sure nobody can dispute that. But you know, before we get talking here, you know, I know I asked you a little earlier, but how's everything in the area in your school with just how's everyone dealing with the coronavirus? Like, what are you doing in particular to kind of keep connected to your students or kind of, you know, helping them deal with this pandemic right now?
So, man, we're in New Jersey, you know, like I'm about halfway between two of the biggest cities in the country, New York and Philadelphia. And as everyone knows, New York has been hit really hard, and I get a lot of people asking me, how are things in Jersey? And it's like everything else is pretty localized, you know. Like I think North Jersey was quite a lot harder than it has been. Like down here for us, we're about an hour from New York, maybe like 45 minutes from Philly, maybe a little closer to Philly, a little more south, you know, right on the edge of like where people cheer for the Giants, and then some other people cheer for the Philadelphia Eagles, you know. So it's pretty cool, but man, it's like every jiu-jitsu school, like every local business that serves people, you know, we've been hit pretty hard. You know, people are losing their jobs, and you know, people are scared, and you know, we're just trying to survive through this, man. I've been pretty positive, you know. I know it's been tough times, but I've never had another job that wasn't teaching jiu-jitsu, and I never thought about doing anything else that wasn't teaching jiu-jitsu, and, you know, first being a student and second being a teacher of this art that we all love. And it would be no different whether we have the, you know, the coronavirus or nuclear holocaust. You know, like this is what I do. Like I won't do anything else. Yeah. As long as I have one student, I'm teaching class. And man, I've seen people, you know, our students, so, you know, it's like everyone else, you know, man, some people really struggle with it. Some people are doing really good and taking the time to, you know, connect with their kids and connect with their families and connect with their friends on Zoom calls. And, you know, they have good days and they have bad days. From our part, as far as the academy, you know, we've been doing the Zoom classes, a lot of really cool Zoom classes with the kids, man. It's awesome to be able to stay in touch with the kids. Like, I miss the kids so much. I miss the adults, but, you know, I miss having the kids around and messing around with them. I'm at my school almost every day working, so it's pretty humbling to walk in. We had just moved to a new location. We have 2 mats, and I walk in, I see empty mats, and I'm like, man, like, you know, when are we going to be back? And I'm sure a lot of the instructors out there are feeling the same. But and I know that a lot of places are going to open up before we open up here in New Jersey. But from my part, man, as long as I have one student, and even if I have 0 students, I'll start from scratch. But we've had incredible support from a lot of our students. Some people, even though they want to support us, they really can't, and I appreciate them so much. And man, I started teaching jiu-jitsu in a racquetball court when nobody knew what this thing was, you know, like, and I had to build something out of nothing. And if we have to do it all over again, we'll do it all over again. But it's different times. People love what we do, and they'll be right back as soon as it's safe enough for all of us to be on the mats training with each other, I feel.
It seems to me like it's a bit of an eye opener for a lot of people. And you know, the word that kind of comes to mind is gratitude and appreciation. I see a lot of, students that are really going to appreciate the time on the mats and really expressing how much they appreciate and they miss that time on the mats. And now as instructors or coaches, maybe we don't see that, but now we're seeing them, we're hearing them, we're listening to them, and we're like, wow. So it's kind of like both ends, they're expressing it and we're seeing it. And I think that, I'm not trying to be the crazy, optimist out of everything, but I think we kind of have to. And sometimes there are little blessings in disguise out of this thing. And, like myself, I'm spending way more time with my family. It's something that was really hard for me because I was traveling a lot and working a lot, and I'm loving it, and we're trying to do some P90X classes with my wife in the morning. So, we're having some fun, and it's, like you said, you just keep going on. You just got to keep moving on. I think jiu-jitsu teaches us patience and how to deal with severe circumstances and just being patient. So there's one thing that we could do is just kind of try to roll with the punches. But, I don't want to dwell too long on the coronavirus. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more, about your story and stuff. And, first off, like I said, my nickname Balea, it's not really cool when people ask me when they don't know what it means. I want to say it means like badass pitbull or something, but it's not as cool. It's not as cool as Cachorrão. So how did you get your nickname?
Man, like my nickname, it's kind of like before jiu-jitsu. I used to live right on the beach in Rio, and I used to surf a lot before I got into jiu-jitsu. And it was actually from like a Brazilian soap opera. Like anyone that's been in Brazil, there's a soap opera that comes on at 7. There's a soap opera that comes on at 8, and it was like the 8 o'clock is like the main soap opera. And it was like a character. There was like he's kind of like a drug dealer, and he just kind of like told people what to do. And we were like 15 years old. I used to go surfing. I used to help organize we used to do like competitions, like surfing competitions, or we play like soccer games. And I was always like in the middle of things, like organizing things, and I guess playing like a little bit of a leadership role, So the lifeguards, which in Brazil, they're like military, they train super hard. They have a gun license and stuff. It's like a whole different ballgame than, the typical lifeguard that we have here at the Jersey Shore, And these guys, I used to hang out with them, and in the summer, people drown a lot in Rio because the waves get really small. So I used to get people out of the water all the time and help people out. I was always in the water surfing. So they started calling me Big Dog because he was a character in a Brazilian soap opera. Nothing really cool. I didn't really do like any big feats or you know what I mean. Like it was more just like I really knew everyone. I knew the lifeguards from surfing. I knew the guys. And then when people from jiu-jitsu started coming and hanging out with me at the beach, they started hearing the lifeguards call me Big Dog, and it just caught on.
Cool. Yeah, it's a lot cooler story than mine. I asked one of my Brazilian coaches, how do you say a whale? Because my jiu-jitsu game looks like a beached whale, like just not knowing what they're doing. And then I was rolling with him, and he was like, "You fucking Balea," because he couldn't move me. So, anyways, yeah, you got a lot more cooler story than mine. But did you end up like getting into jiu-jitsu through that whole surf culture, or how did you end up start training? Because I know in Rio, a lot of the guys were surfing, and a lot of connection there between the surfistas and the jiu-jiteros. So how did you end up getting started hooked up in training jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, in Rio, and then I think in general, like I think even now, if you look at a lot of the pro surfers, everyone trains jiu-jitsu. It's a very close and interconnected culture. Like a lot of people from jiu-jitsu know their way through the surfing community and the other way around. But man, I had a friend that I went to school with since like 6th grade. And when we were in our first year of high school, I was getting a little older. My dad wanted me to, learn how to defend myself. And he had done Shotokan karate. So he put me and my brother Flavio in a karate school. And I started doing karate. And my friend had started training at Gracie with Jean-Jacques Machado when Jean-Jacques was still in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Ricardo, you got to come do some jiu-jitsu." And, I was like, "Man, you're just over there hugging guys." And, like that old school mentality, like, kids just making fun of each other. And finally, one day he talked me into, like, Jean-Jacques had already moved to the United States. So this was at the original Gracie Barra with Master Carlos. So my first class, I walk in, and man, like, I remember Master Carlos was teaching, like arm lock. Your opponent pulls the arm out, you go omoplata. Your opponent tries to posture up, you go triangle, and just the flow, the precision, the options, and knowing that you could actually do that to another human being, and there was so much dexterity, the combination with your legs and your arms. I was hooked. I went home and I started practicing on Flavio, like on our carpet, and getting carpet burns, and then here I am. Like I still have that same passion for the technical and fascination with the technical aspect of jiu-jitsu, and the feeling that I get when I'm on the mat and when I'm training and when I'm paying attention to the things that I'm doing. Like it's still the same. I still feel like a little kid when now guys are doing more leg locks, and I'm like studying it and trying to figure that out, and yeah, like it still feels the same. But it was a friend, Marcelo. We went to high school together. He actually he runs Gracie Barra in Australia now. Marcelo Resende.
Okay.
He's he's one of the big guys that one of the big regional directors for Gracie Barra. But yeah, he's the one that brought me to jiu-jitsu.
Nice. And what ended up bringing you over to the States? Because I remember you were one of, and I don't think a lot of people know this, but you were one of the first guys to really compete in a super fight, in a grappling super fight in the United States. Wow. Not a lot of people remember that, but I do. I remember, I think it was either a Naga or it was a Grappler's Quest, but I know for sure you were in the first Grappler's Quest as the main super fight, because I remember at the time, and that's how I kind of got to know who you were. And then I was also at the Naga when you fought Fabiano Capone in the super fight, and again, that was one of the first super fights ever at that time. So you were already making a pretty big name for yourself in North America, even being a brown belt under Renzo. So what brought you to America, to New York? And I want to hear a little bit about the early days of kind of training and competing in North America.
So man, Renzo brought me here. I was born in New York.
Okay.
And I have I had a U.S. passport. My parents were going to grad school at Manhattan College, and then they moved back to Brazil. I grew up in Rio, and I was already training. I was a purple belt. I won the nationals in 1996. And man, I was like 18. I had just gotten into university in Brazil. I wasn't really liking what I was doing. I was doing industrial engineering. It was pretty far from Baja. I had to take 2 buses. I couldn't really train much, and I just wasn't happy, man. And I was seeing that the people coming out of university didn't really have as many opportunities. I wasn't probably like the best university in Rio, the Federal University. For free, it was really hard to get in. Very, very competitive. And I saw the salaries. Like a professor gave me an assignment, and I started to see how much money people were making when they were coming out of university. I was like, man, like what? Like, there's no way. And I wasn't training. I wasn't really happy. Renzo had just moved here in 96. So 97, he was opening his second school in Philadelphia. We had a very close friend. He knew I had American passport, and he just kind of connected me and Renzo, Renzo was like the hero for us coming up at Gracie Barra. When I started training, Renzo was the only black belt beside Master Carlos Jr. And, Renzo gave me the invitation in 97. I moved here. I lived at his house for like the first couple of months. Then I moved out on my own. And I taught classes at the Renzo Gracie Philadelphia school in the beginning, and trained in New York the other days because I used to live at Renzo's. And eventually that school closed. Renzo had like a scumbag partner that was like, stealing money from a lot of the Brazilians that first came here had like a really bad experience, and a lot had great experiences. But Renzo closed that school down, and then I moved closer to New York. And I was at the first Naga, man. I think I was at the first big Naga, but even before that Grappler's Quest that you're talking about. One of my students used to live up there. He used to know Kip Collar very well. And we all drove up. I think it was Hartford, Connecticut. We drove like 6-7 hours here from South Jersey. And the point was that, man, I knew that I needed to compete to keep improving. I was only a brown belt, or even if I was a black belt. And the Worlds was still in Brazil. Like there was no Worlds here. Like I won nationals in 96 as a purple belt. 97, I went back to Rio to compete at the nationals as a brown belt that I ended up winning. But there was no big gi competitions here. They started having the Pan Ams were always here, but it was not that many people came,
Oh, yeah.
So I knew that I needed to compete. I knew that I needed to keep progressing. So I started doing these super fights, you know, like every 2-3 months, I was doing these super fights. Man, I would have loved to have, you know, fight to win and all these things that we have now. You know, every weekend you could tune into Full Grappling and there's a competition. I think that I would have reached a certain level technically and competitively that for sure would be far above where I was able to reach competing, you know, 2-3 times a year, 4 times a year, you know, back in 1996, 97, 98, 99, 2000, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, you were one of the first guys. I remember, you know, like I didn't know too many guys at the Renzo Gracie team. I'm from, you know, Ontario, Canada. I knew who Renzo was. Eventually, later, I heard about Matt Serra, but I remember seeing you were kind of one of his first top guys to go compete. And one of the things that really stood out for me was you were one of the first guys to go to ADCC and representing jiu-jitsu. And I believe you were still a brown belt at the time in '98. So how was that? Like, how was it that you got in, number one, to ADCC at that time? Because you know, it was a little bit different at that time. You know, it seemed like they were just going after like the names like Renzo and Sperry and so forth. But for the fact that you were there, that kind of told everyone, man, like how legit you were. So how did you get in? And I want to hear a little bit about your experience at that first ADCC, because I think, you know, some of the new fans of the sport, they, you know, we saw the recent ADCC was insane, you know, 4,000 spectators, the biggest one ever. The next one's going to be in Vegas, probably bigger than that. And I think that we've seen how big it is, but in the early days, it was a lot different. You know, nobody in the crowd, different prize money. I heard stories about golden daggers and Range Rovers. So tell me a little bit about that first Abu Dhabi experience that you had.
So, man, again, you know, back then was invitation only. You know, like the first ADCC, I believe all the other one, you know, the first few were invitation only. I don't think they did a trial until '99 or 2000, something like that. I'm not sure. I know that for sure the first one was invitation only.
Yeah.
And you know, again, through Renzo, man, you know, Renzo brought me and he brought Rodrigo Gracie. We each fought in one weight class, and I fought like the up to 220 or 217 weight class, which I ended up fighting Arona also in that weight class a few years later, but that was never my weight class. I was only a brown belt. Man, we show up to Abu Dhabi, and man, Renzo actually fought in Japan, so I met them there because I was going to school at the time. I was doing like a local college, so I couldn't miss that many days, and I met them in Abu Dhabi. And I remember I flew to Amsterdam. I waited in Amsterdam, and I flew to Saudi Arabia, and I looked outside the window, and there was like all these like these artillery missiles, like anti-aircraft artillery, like a battery of missiles in Saudi Arabia, like a complete military airport. And I was like, man, what am I doing here? You know. And we show up to Abu Dhabi, and it was very, very different. And even the last time I went was when Frankie fought BJ Penn in 2010, I believe.
Yep.
It was very different than 1998, where, you know, you had the Corniche, which was right on the water, and there was, you know, behind Corniche, there was nothing. It was just all sand. And now you go and man, like they built like islands, they built everything. But yeah, there was nobody on the crowd. They had drums playing the whole time. And I think the Sheiks were playing like fantasy ADCC with us, like a couple of us. They were like, here, Ricardo, here's like $5,000. Wear this T-shirt. Someone is sponsoring you. And then the other guy, you know, here's this T-shirt. It was so long ago. There was not even rash guards, man. We wore like you know, cotton shirts with something printed on. You know, no board shorts, or board shorts were from surfing. You know, from surfing companies. There was no like, you know, grappling shorts. And I was a brown belt. Man, now I fought a Russian guy a sambo Russian guy in the first round. I think some like shoot fighter in the second round. Like a Gracie Academy guy in the semi, and I ended up fighting Mario Sperry in the final. And, you know, I didn't really know what to expect. Sperry was a legend. You know, I was a brown belt, and I was like, man, this guy's going to kill me. He was so much heavier than me. I was like, man, this guy's going to kill me. And I think in that match, I started to believe that. I was like, man, like, I could do something with this, you know. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was totally outmatched. But just from growing up, I remember like back in the first Worlds, like 1996, seeing some of the black belt matches. Man, they were so freaking boring, man. You know, like the guys just played so safe. There were some amazing guys, but you know, you watch like Amaury Bitecci and Fabio Gurgel, which are two amazing guys, two of the best guys that ever done this sport. And you watch the final of the Open, and bro, they did nothing, you know?
It was like one thing that happened the entire fight.
Sometimes the nature of the game, you can't make a mistake because then you lose, you know, you want to win. And I just remember that, man, the day I'm a black belt, I'm not going to fight like that, you know? And when I fought Sperry, you know, I just laid all on the line. I almost swept him, and he ended up like passing my guard momentarily. And then I put him back in guard, and it was like a 20-minute match with one of the best guys ever. And I thought I was going to get killed. And he, you know, I felt like he passed my guard for like 2 or 3 seconds, and then he went back in my guard. And I was like, man, like, all right, cool. Like, it gave me confidence to come back and do the other things. And because I took second, I think back then was it if you podium, you immediately invited back to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
I just kept getting podiums every year, so I kept coming back. That's just kind of like, you know, that's just kind of how things go. I don't think from 98 all the way up through 2003, there wasn't like a single ADCC that I didn't podium. So I just kept going back and going back and going back. And after 2003, I retired from MMA fighting, and I wasn't like really more into fighting for a few years. So that was my last ADCC. I fought Jacare, fought for a couple of the guys.
You know, the one thing that I remember when you competed, and I think it was a testament to a lot of the guys on your team as well, the very similar style, in the fact that what we would see with some of the ADCC guys or some of the jiu-jitsu guys in ADCC, they would be pulling guard or they would end up on their back. Maybe they would get taken down and they would have offensive guard. But if they couldn't sweep or submit from the bottom, it was over. Whereas the guys from your team, and I think your style especially, sort of started to really wrestle and kind of came into ADCC already with that advantage in wrestling, number one. And number two, really, really damn good with guillotines. And the style was a lot different than the guys in jiu-jitsu that we would see, like I said, losing in ADCC or even in the UFC at that time. Like, jiu-jitsu was starting to decline. They were losing decisions because they weren't able to submit off their back. So what was it about your team and your style? Like, what did you do and how did you kind of come up with that strategy to fight in that different manner? Because I saw it. I mean, maybe this is just an assumption on my end, but you definitely look different. You know, I saw a lot more guillotines from the Renzo team than a lot of the other teams. They were all trying to do arm bars and triangles, but it wasn't working, especially when the gi came off. So what was it? How did you guys figure out that you had to modify your techniques or game, or was it just kind of luck of the draw?
Yeah, so it's just one of those things that you learn with the experience, you know, like in ADCC, if you pull, it's a -1.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not in the beginning of the match. In the beginning of the match, you could pull, but you see a lot of the matches, all right, you pull, and then nothing happens, and then you get the full 5 minutes, the full 10 minutes, and then in overtime, you're going to have to pull, and then you pull, and you take a -1, and it's over. You see a lot of matches end up like that, you know, a lot of matches being lost with that -1, and I was like, man, like, I'm not going to go into this thing already taking a -1 because you're not going to sweep these guys, you know?
Yeah.
We had the huge advantage that we were here on the East Coast. We were here in New York, New Jersey. There's a lot of great wrestlers here, you know? So I remember the way Renzo created the Arm In Guillotine is because Renzo had already, you know, pretty much been the first guy to play a sit-up guard, you know? Like, and, you know, he would sit up. If you watch the De La Riva match, Renzo versus De La Riva, you know, De La Riva actually sweeps him with the omoplata, which back then it was no points. So Renzo goes to the bottom. He puts him in butterfly guard. As soon as Renzo sits up and grabs the belt, he tosses De La Riva 2-0. He wins the match. It was the first, I think it was the first Brazilian Nationals. I competed in that as like a 16-year-old, you know. Mm-hmm. So fast forward a few years, living here in the United States, Renzo is trying to sit up and sweep the wrestlers, and they just won't get swept, you know, because you no longer had the belt grip. And even if you have an overhook, when you try to sweep the guys, you know, they post with the other hand. So what Renzo started doing is grabbing the head because, you know, they keep the head up and they try to post. So Renzo would grab the head like a front headlock and sweep towards the head and get on top. So basically it was a modified butterfly guard sweep, and Renzo was sweeping all these really great wrestlers. He had like Rico Chiapparelli. He had like all these guys who were like, you know, decorated wrestlers. But what the guys would do is they would start to back up. So as soon as Renzo would grab the head, they would start to back up. So as soon as the hips went back, Renzo started locking the guillotine. And I remember, man, clear as day that one day we were in the Philly school. He's like, Ricardo, man, like I started finishing this guillotine. Like, let me show you here. And it was with the arm in. You know, there was no such. It was not called a guillotine. It was a gravata. You know, which is a necktie. And guys would do it without the arm. That's how guys finish it back in the day. So Renzo was trying to sweep the wrestlers, and they would just, you know, push themselves back, and Renzo was starting to lock the guard. And the main adjustment, it wasn't like the gravata where you arch like an arm lock and you extend your leg. It's completely different. It's a side crunch, and you pull your knees to your chest. That's how Renzo created the guillotine. It, you know, looks like the same move with a complete different squeeze, you know. And we had that, and then next thing, we had all these wrestlers. And man, I just knew, man, if I don't sweep these guys, I'm not going to be able to do anything. Like, we knew from training with guys like that, that this is exactly what was going to happen. So we had to figure out a way to improve our game and go into ADCC a little bit more ready. So Renzo made us wrestle a lot. I remember Sean Williams would bring us to in one of the colleges in New York. We had wrestlers that would come. I would practice a lot of wrestling to try and improve the takedown game very specifically towards ADCCs. You know, you knew that once a year, you're going to travel to Abu Dhabi. You're going to fight, you know, these Russian guys, these wrestlers, like a Jeff Monson as an example. Yep. And you have to figure out how to beat these guys, you know. So it was really a combination of the ADCC rule set together with us having so many wrestlers up here on the Northeast. You know, Jersey has great high school wrestling. New York has great high school wrestling. So these guys will come, and we knew exactly what was going to happen if we couldn't sweep. Whereas I think a lot of the guys that came from Brazil, they hadn't had the experience of grappling versus a really strong wrestler once you can't submit them. You know, someone that has a little background.
I never thought of it that way, to be honest, you know, and I'm really glad that you gave me that explanation specifically on the mechanics of the Arm In Guillotine and the history of it. Cause that's what I love to find out is the history of a lot of the techniques. Cause it gives me a little bit more of an appreciation and understanding. And especially for somebody that was there when it kind of got innovated, now I kind of understand it a little even better, just listening to you talk about it. And, you know, the one thing that I remember seeing you compete, you had a really good Arm In Guillotine as well. And while you were talking through it, I'm visualizing the match with Josh Barnett. That's how you ended up finishing it. So can you talk me through that match with Barnett? Because to me, that was a really impressive match. The guy was huge. He was a lot chubbier back then, but man, he was a pretty good wrestler, you know, pancreation guy, good with leg locks. And I don't think too many people submitted him, and you were one of the first guys to do that in the absolute. So can you talk me through that match a little bit?
Yeah, man, Josh is like a tricky guy to fight because he's not necessarily a jiu-jitsu guy that's going to go past your guard and smash you, you know. But man, like if he grabs something on you, he's going to rip that thing off, you know. He was 290 pounds when I fought him. I was like 200. Wow. I was like, man, if the guy grabs something on me, he's going to, you know, he's going to hurt me. And he was trying to hurt me, you know. He knew that he was the bigger guy. He was trying to bully me around. And just from the experience of being in a couple ADCCs and the experience of, you know, Renzo used to go teach seminars, and I was like, Renzo, can I come in and, like, you know, you show moves on me? And always at the end of the seminars, we'd train with these guys, you know, like, and, you know, no matter where it was, you had to train with everybody. So every once in a while, there would be a huge, like, football guy or some huge wrestler. So I had already had that, you know, that experience. So going into the Barnett fight, I knew that I had 5 minutes to get him tired and then another 5 minutes to score, you know. I always love using the omoplata to score on big guys. You know, like I don't like getting underneath and trying to do, like, you know, taking out the trash sweeps with really big guys, especially in no gi where you don't have that leverage, you know. So going into that match, I was trying to make him tired, eventually get an omoplata and sweep him, you know. I ended up getting the omoplata. I go for like a toe hold, and he attacks my foot, and he almost breaks my leg, man. So I popped out, and I could start to feel him getting tight. I could start to feel him just backing up and getting a little bit slower. So finally, I just collar tied him. And a lot of times, guys collar tie and they snap the head down into this arm. One of the things that we used to do, we used to grab here and snap it to the same side, so it surprised guys a lot, you know. So I snapped it. I jumped Arm In Guillotine. I kind of knew that I had it, but man, he was just so much bigger. And actually, the other day, someone asked me to break it down. I could see my elbow like pointing up to the ceiling, and I was like, man, how did I finish that? And then I waited, and you could see that the elbow is up, and it's not until I crunch and I get the elbow in front of me that the finish happens. You know, like it goes from here to here on the left side. And yeah, that's pretty much how he went. Like Josh ended up, you know, he submitted Dean Lister at one of the minimum warriors, I think. He went and did Nogi Worlds. He won Nogi Worlds. Like, he's definitely like, you know, he won the UFC heavyweight title against Couture. he's a monster, man. Like I didn't know how that was gonna go, but it was a pretty decent game for that type of situation.
Yeah, like I said, that was as you were explaining the Arm In Guillotine a few seconds ago, I was totally visualizing that. I saw the match a few weeks ago again, and a little bit today prepping for my call with you. But super memorable. What would you say in ADCC history? Because that's where I think in grappling specifically, that was one of the biggest areas where your name kind of grew. What was you say your most memorable match or your most proud match that you had at that event?
Man, I think first of all, I have such fond memories of ADCC. Like I remember having it in my head all year round. Like I think a lot of the kids that grow up, they want to be like jiu-jitsu, gi world champions. Like from the time I did my first ADCC and I lost to Sperry in the final, I was like, man, like I want to be a ADCC world champion. Like I want to win ADCC. Like that's a big goal of mine. So the entire year, no matter what was going on, that was something that was playing in my mind, and I always showed up, ready to the best of my ability. Man, I think the fight with Arona was like a really fun one. Like and it was the second time that I made the final, and I lost by like a -1 again because I went for a guillotine and I missed the guillotine. I mean, Arona had never been his whole time he never even been scored at ADCC. But I went for a guillotine. And I had a long sleeve shirt, a long sleeve rash guard, and I could feel the long sleeve rash guard give on the guillotine. And man, that was the last time I competed with a long sleeve rash guard. Never again I competed with a long sleeve rash guard because I could feel the rash guard move on the guillotine and his head popped out. I mean, who knows? Probably I wouldn't have gotten it anyways. But the Arona match, the Jacare match was super fun because man, like he was only a brown belt at the time when I fought him. I was already doing MMA. I was coming back from, I had just fought like in Japan. In 3 weeks later, I did ADCC, and Jacare was already killing everyone. I knew about him, and man, he was moving at a speed, and at I just remember, I was like, man, this is what must have been like to play against Michael Jordan. I felt like the first like 5 to 8 minutes of the match, like he was just moving at a different speed than me. Like I wasn't even fighting him. I was just like trying to slow him down and pick my spots in the match, And I think that I fought very well that match. I think there was a couple of we went 4 overtimes.
Yeah, I remember that being super long.
Yeah, yep. And I remember just hands were coming to me, or it might have been Hoyler. Like, man, like they're not gonna pick a winner. You guys are gonna keep going until somebody scores. And this is like the 3rd or 4th overtime. And I'm like, man, all right, I'm just gonna keep going. Like I'm just gonna be here until tomorrow because I'm not gonna let this guy score on me, and I don't think I could score on him either. Like we're gonna be here until tomorrow. And man, we went back and forth with takedowns and back takes, and he took my back and he went to go for a seatbelt, and when he went for the seatbelt, his thumb went in my mouth. So when his thumb went in my mouth, like it just completely broke my concentration. I went to take his hand off my mouth, and the hook came in. And he scored with like a back take. And then from there, it was impossible to come back. But that was a really fun memory. I think the Higan Machado match too. I finished Higan with a guillotine just from who Higan was, and right after that, Renzo gave me my black belt. So I think that's a special one for me too.
That's awesome. And like I said, ADCC definitely one of for grappling that you had a lot of memorable matches, but also North America you had a ton of good matches. I don't want to talk specifically about MMA too much because I mean you probably been doing that a lot with all the MMA interviewers, but this is a jiu-jitsu podcast. I want to stick to what's going. Yeah, but the one thing I want to ask, because it's funny because knowing Renzo, hanging around with him a few times, I when I read about the story about you in Pride and your debut in Pride, I could totally see how this played out, but I want to hear it from you. How did you end up fighting? Because I know you were there in Japan. You weren't even scheduled to fight, and what happened? Renzo's just like, Cachorrão, you're gonna fight. Like, give me the real scoop here. How did you end up fighting your debut against Akira Shoji? Was it Akira Shoji?
Yeah, it was Shoji. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that end up happening?
Man, so Ryan Gray, Renzo's late brother, was fighting Sakuraba, and Ryan used to come all the time, and we would train. We were like really close friends. We would spend a lot of time together when Ryan was here training, And Ryan's like, man, I want to go to Japan early could you come with me for 2 weeks? I'm like, yeah, man, sure. So it was me, Ryan, and Luca Talla, the editor of Gracie magazine. We went early to Japan for like 2 weeks. Renzo was only going to get there like a few days before the fight, you know. So we were there for 2 weeks for like about 10 days training. We actually had a chance to train with Rickson. I mean, I had a chance to spend like a whole day like with Rickson. That was pretty impressive, you know, especially at that time. And I think it was about like 4 or 5 days before the fight. Alan Goes was supposed to fight Akira Shoji, and he got hurt and he pulled out. And, you know, they're like, oh, man, we have to find someone to fight Shoji. You know, we got to call Brazil. Who's going to come from Brazil? And then Ryan was like, man, why don't you do it? And he just kind of put me on the spot, you know. And I was like, man, like, if Renzo says it's okay, I'll do it. You know, like, it's fine. Like, I never thrown a punch in my entire, I mean.
So you weren't even,
never did a round of sparring my entire life, you know what I mean? Like, and Renzo said, you know, Ricardo wants to do it because, you know, I was never really into MMA, man. You know, like the UFC wasn't like a pay-per-view, you know what I mean? Like, I always loved competing, and I just wanted to be the best in the world, you know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to be among the best. And the UFC, you know, it wasn't on pay-per-view. You know, the senators back at the time were like against the UFC. Like, it just didn't have the feel of being among the best at something, you know, like it was something that was kind of like put and being seen as like negative, you know. And you know, MMA just it's never something that I thought about until then. And Hans was like, man, does Ricardo really want to do it? And then Ryan's like, yeah, he wants to do it. I'm like, all right, cool. So that's it, man. 3 days later, I'm walking out, 25,000 people, Saitama Arena, and
wow,
one of the toughest Japanese guys there was in Pride, and you know, I had a little bit of beginner's luck, I think. You know, the fight went my way. I couldn't take him down. The whole fight was on our feet. I was taller, so I just kept jabbing and leg kicking him. I ended up hitting some takedowns. 2 10-minute rounds, so very different than, you know, than even the UFC nowadays. But and then from there, I think it was the next month, the Fertittas bought the UFC, and Dana and Lorenzo Fertitta came to the New York Academy to try to sign Renzo. And Renzo was like, man, like I can't. I have a contract with Pride, but I have these 2 kids over here. And me and Matt were on the mats. Me and Matt Sarah, and Dana just kind of walked up to us. Hey, come on, guys. And Renzo said it then, man, these guys are gonna. I asked Renzo, man, why are we gonna fight in the UFC, man? This thing is not even on pay-per-view. You know, like I want to fight in Pride. I don't want to fight in the UFC. He's like, Ricardo, these guys are gonna change. These guys are gonna change the game. I'm like, all right, cool, Renzo, whatever you say. So, you know, me and Matt ended up fighting the UFC after that. So that's kind of how my MMA career started.
That's awesome. And, you know, you had an amazing career in Pride and a career in UFC. You were one of the most exciting jiu-jitsu guys because you would, you know, you really were truly expressing mixed martial arts. You did it all, striking, you know, submissions, wrestling. So always exciting to watch. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, you know, I remember, I don't know if it was a few years ago, you kind of made a post or a comment specifically about jiu-jitsu and the rules of jiu-jitsu. And you were kind of saying like, hey guys, like if we keep tweaking the rules, it's going to end up being judo. Was that you? Do you remember saying something like that? Yeah. So I want to hear your perspective on kind of where that was coming from and just how you think about, you know, the direction of jiu-jitsu and where it's going right now as far as the rules and maybe the competitions and so forth.
So man, like I think, you know, first of all, like I don't really have necessarily like a dissatisfaction with the rules. You know, like one of the things I love the most about jiu-jitsu right now, you know, you said that you work closely with Flow Grappling. You know, it's like, man, like you could turn on any Friday evening on, you know, before this whole thing with the lockdowns happened. It's like, man, you could see, you know, submission only events. You know, the fight to wins. I did a fight to win. Like I love fight to win. And, you know, we have the Eddie Bravo, you know, the Eddie Bravo events, and you have like all these different expressions of jiu-jitsu. And to me, they're all really cool, you know, like I think to this day, probably the 2 hardest competitions to win, in my opinion, are ADCC and the Gi Worlds, you know, like, and in some ways, like a lot of the Gi rules, it's too restrictive. you know, like, and it's restrictive in a sense. And I understand these are amateur guys, man. You know, these guys are not supposed to be getting their legs broken or anything like that. But they got to make some pro rules, you know, like I feel. And even the gi sometimes slows the matches down too much, man. You know, like if you have like any symmetrical grip, you know what I mean? Like if you have two sleeve grips, bro, like how's the other person gonna move? If you have two pant grips, like how's the other person gonna move? You know, like so to me, I would just like to see more dynamic matches, like when it comes as far as like the gi side of things. But even ADCC, if you're not careful, you know, it's just two guys trying to wrestle. They're not necessarily great at wrestling, man. You know, like I'd rather go watch NCAAs if it's going to be just that, you know. But again, this is just the fighters exploiting the rule set and trying to win, which I totally respect, man. Like it's very hard to win, you know, gi worlds even at the blue belt level, you know, and win an ADCC and win any of these, you know, because guys are very good and they're not only very good at grappling, they're very good at winning, you know, which they go hand in hand, but not everyone that's good at grappling knows how to win very well, you know, like and the other way around. I feel. Yeah, I would just like to see, you know, maybe pro rules for gi jiu-jitsu. You know, I think that, you know, it's come a time where we need something like that, you know, like maybe I used to love the Copa Podios back in the day where it was like 5 minutes, you know, and guys doing like groups and brackets and something just to make the game more dynamic. But I love it all, man. I love I watch the girls, the guys and the girls, you know, like I love watching the ADCCs. I love the fight to win. It's like the other day I turned on my TV like 6 o'clock in the morning. It was like a Gary Turner match on Flow Grappling. Popped up for me when I went on Flow Sports. And I have Flow Sports for running to my kids run. So I was looking for some type of training. Like, oh man, that's Gary. Let me watch that. So I'm watching Gary. I think it was Gary and Durinho or something like that. Was one of their latest matches.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was, man. Gary was killing it, you know. As he always, he's always so exciting to watch. You know, Gary, in my opinion, is the most exciting guy to watch.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I don't really like dislike the rules. I love that we have all these expressions. You have combat jiu-jitsu, we have everything, you know.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have something like flow and you know, and then, you know, on the instruction side, you have like Bernardo doing his thing. And, you know, to me, like all those things, there's been no better time to be a jiu-jitsu practitioner and a jiu-jitsu student and even an instructor, you know.
So, you know, we talk about the events, but I wanted to ask you something about maybe a question for beginners in jiu-jitsu, white or blue belts. I had Shaolin on my podcast a few weeks back, and one of the comments that he said, and I've been asking a lot of the OGs this question, and they all love it because they agree with it. But Shaolin said, you know what, Shaolin was telling his students that they decided to start training jiu-jitsu in the hardest time in the world, not because of the corona, but because we have TikTok, we have Instagram in your hand, YouTube. So what ends up happening is the students kind of come to class with, especially at the beginner level or even like white or blue belt, and they already have like their vision of what they should and shouldn't do or techniques that they're thinking about. And then they don't really focus necessarily or you know, kind of follow the guidance of the instructor because they're so, you know, they're so obsessed with like the latest YouTube video and stuff like that. What's your take on that comment or that statement? And also, you know, what do you think is the safest thing for, or advice for people starting jiu-jitsu? You know, like I said, you've done it all. You competed at the highest level. No one can ever dispute that. You've won at the highest level. So anything you say is legit. So if you had to give advice to a person on how to build their game, you know, what would it be in that regard, as far as learning from the instructor and also learning from online resources?
Man, I think that every coin has two sides, you know, and you have to take the good with the bad. And as a student, you're your own craftsman, you know, like you're trying to learn something, and you're taking the time to learn something that's very hard. Jiu-jitsu is very hard. It's not complex. It's just hard, man. You know, like even for us, we've been doing this for such a long time, and we have bad days, man. You get on the mats and you think that you had this thing figured out, and man, like not 100%, you know.
Yep.
I'll make an analogy that has to do a little bit with surfing. Like I love surfing, just to get it like out of context a little bit.
Sure.
You know, if you turn on a surfing movie right now, it looks like snowboarding. It's all like air rotations and things like that. You know, when probably like 95% of people that surf can't do that. You know, jiu-jitsu, if we're not careful, can be like that. You know, because all of a sudden, I look at Gary Tonin, and to me, he's the most exciting guy to watch. You know, like later on, you know, I'll make a comparison between him and Gordon. But Gary is so exciting. But bro, like if you try to mold your game after Gary, like you're probably gonna end up hurt. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that he does. They are just super precise and super technical. But especially his escapes, like the way that he's offensive, like his jumping things. It's like, man, like unless you're like a teenager in your early 20s, like you know, like I don't want to mold my game after that because I'm scared of getting hurt, you know. And if we're not careful, a lot of the culture of what we're supposed to be learning, even at the white belt level, is dictated by, you know, what happened at Worlds or what happened at ADCC or what happened at, you know, what's Gordon doing, what's Gary doing, what's Galvão doing, what are, you know, what the Mendes brothers doing, Musumeci, what's Musumeci doing, bro? Like how are you gonna mold your game after Musumeci? He's like an octopus, you know. So if we're not careful, I think that can be bad. But on the other hand, I remember being a blue belt and going to a competition. It was really like a software update experience. You know, it's like, all right, there's the new update on the iPhone. Let's see what's gonna happen. What are the new features that are gonna happen? We'll go to competitions and you compete. We also look at what the other people in the other schools were doing because we didn't have access to what they were doing. There was no YouTube. There was no videos. There was nothing. And you know, in almost every time, someone would get their butt kicked by something that somebody was doing from another school. And we had to figure that out and show up to the next competition ready for that. You know, so I think nowadays having YouTube, having Instagram, bro, I have like a you know, when you save the videos on Instagram, I have a folder just for techniques. I see kids doing this and that and the other, and I save it and I go back and I look because, man, almost all the time I see stuff that I've never seen, you know, and it doesn't matter if I could do it. Like I want to try to figure it out. Maybe I teach to one of my young guys that's competing, you know. So I think that all the information, all the digital side of jiu-jitsu, I think it can be incredible as a learning tool, as a support to what you learn. But I think that one of the biggest things that we're learning when we enter the mats is learning how to learn, is learning how to be white belt. Like before you get to learn how to arm lock people, you have to learn how to be a student. You have to learn how to learn. And as you learn how to learn, you got to learn how to teach yourself. Like the first person you're ever going to teach is yourself. Because when you show up, you're not showing up to learn to be taught jiu-jitsu. You're showing up to learn jiu-jitsu. It's very different. And you're showing up to learn with a bunch of people that you have to get along and learn how to support. And, you know, some days you're not going to get along with everybody. So you got to figure out your way like into the pack, you know. But it's like everything else, you know. There's the good and the bad, but I tend to always think that the good outweighs the bad. And ultimately, man, you know, like as an instructor, I can only worry about when people are, you know, or before, you know, when people are trained, they're under my guidance, they're on my mats, they're on our mats training. And bro, if they don't want to listen, like how many times can I say something? You know what I mean? Like how many times can you give the same advice if someone is not listening? And I think it's a waste of everyone's time for someone to be at the academy, you know, trying to take advice from a move they've seen on YouTube. Definitely learn stuff from YouTube. Man, like, go watch the finals of Worlds and see what happened. Try to figure that out. You know, come in, ask your instructor, you know. What I remember being my relationship with Renzo is me asking him, like, Renzo, you know, like, what do you think about this? Like, what do you think about that? You know, like, I was like, I remember one of the questions was like, Renzo, why don't you fight with the gi, man? Like, you know, when you fight MMA, why don't you fight in the gi? You know what I mean? Like, you know, isn't it easier to fight if the guy is holding you, he's not hitting you? He's like, Ricardo, you out of your mind? Like, did you even think before you asked me that question? Someone can hold you with one hand and keep you at distance and punch you with the other hand. Why would I do that? You know? And from watching Royce doing it in the first UFC, I was like, man, like, I was so embarrassed from even asking that question. But your instructor is almost always there with an open heart to teach and to facilitate things, you know, and all of a sudden you start to bring like a bunch of nonsense from the outside that's just bits and pieces. I feel for the jiu-jitsu student, even though all the digital resources are great, their professor or their coach, and even some of the senior students at the school are always the best resource.
It's a good point. You know, I respect that a lot. I feel like I said, you know, I see it even, you know, some of the guys I teach, and I want to be able to help them and answer all their questions. And sometimes I'm legit stumped. I'm like, hey man, I don't have the answer to that, you know, triple worm guard, heel hook, and then, you know what I mean? Like but I know, you know, sometimes you want to tell them, but you don't really need that because you don't know how to upa or you don't know how to hip escape yet, but you don't want to offend them. So it's kind of a hard thing as a coach. You want to give them the answer that they need, but you know, sometimes it's not the answer they want. And that's, for me, that comes a little tough. And especially, I don't really own the academy. I teach for a friend. So I just try my best to keep everyone happy. As far as developing your game, you know, back in the day, what sort of things helped you sort of develop a game? You know, one of the mistakes that I made a long time ago was I didn't value the time of drilling. I was always under the impression that if I learned the latest technique, I would always have the edge. And then I would, you know, maybe do some conditioning or physical training, but I didn't spend enough time on positions and really analyzing positions and breaking them down. I was always like just adding more technique, but I wasn't really getting awesome at them. So what really helped you kind of mold your game? Was it drilling? Was it more technical? Can you give me a little bit of insight on that?
Man, I think I was really lucky to start at the time that I started under the environment that I did. But I think a lot of schools are like that. Like Master Carlos he's always been very open-minded, you know. He just gave us the basic blueprint that he learned. Even if you watch like a basic Gracie in action movie, you know, like if you walked at Gracie Barra back when I started, class would start with a lot of fit-ins. You know, we always do takedowns, a lot of judo takedowns, which I wish we were wrestling instead of doing judo, but, you know, we'll save that for another conversation. You know, but a lot of takedowns, a lot of top game, a lot of bottom game. Like there was not – Master Carlos never really imposed, like, you know, you have to have this game or that game. He allowed us, or not me, I was the least talented guy in the room. He allowed the other guys, you know, like Roleta played like upside down guard, you know. Marcio Feitosa had a very, you know, strong judo game. Nino could do everything, you know, like Gordo developed the half guard. Master Hanzo did the sit-up guard, and, you know, he also had takedowns. So everyone did like one specific strong thing, but they were all good at everything, you know. So I think from a very early on, I wanted to be very well-rounded. You know, like I wanted to do takedowns. Like I didn't want to like be on my feet and like, oh man, I'm gonna pull guard because I'm scared, or hey, I'm gonna do this because, you know, because I don't know what to do. It's like, man, like, what? What do you mean you don't know what to do? Like look at all these guys that you train with. You don't know how to do a takedown. You don't know how to do a guard pass. You don't know how to do this. So I never had the problem of trying to get too trapped in a rabbit hole, you know, learning one thing, you know. Also, we didn't have access to that many things, and there wasn't that many guards or that many different things, you know. Looking back, when Gordo started doing half guard, because the half guard is a lot easier to master than the other open guards that do require a lot of dexterity, I think the half guard can become a stepping stone in a student's game to be able to learn open guard a little bit more and be more effective in open guard, and, you know, and competing and trying to not lose and then win. But man, like I lost a bunch of competitions at purple belt level because I would fight these judo guys and I'll pull half guard and I couldn't sweep them from half guard, and it wasn't until I learned how to mash the half guard like with other things and other ways to score. It was just too predictable in my, you know, looking back now for my style, you know. I didn't want to get so strong at one thing and just be super predictable that guys just step on the mat. Like, all right, cool, I just got to stop that, you know. And definitely I wasn't Gordo that was going to sweep everybody. So looking back, like I have this love and hate relationship with the half guard. At ADCC, I used a lot of deep half. Like I used to sweep a lot of the wrestlers with deep half. When I fought Dean Lister at Grappler's Quest, I swept him with deep half. So I used to love using deep half. But man, like as a purple belt, I was like, man, like I can't win with this stupid half. I gotta do something else, you know?
Yeah.
And I had to figure out and evolve my game. But it wasn't something that was imposed on me. It's just that it kind of felt easier than playing, you know, maybe like a De La Riva guard or a Spider guard or some other guards that, you know, to me, I don't think I ever felt like really confident in my guard until I was a black belt, you know, like. And it's still like, man, if someone's punching me in the face, I don't want to be on the bottom. I want to be on top, you know. I have a little bit of I have trust in it, but man, like guys are gonna pound you if you're on your back. You gotta get out and get up and get on top, you know. That's just kind of how I feel. But I'm always open, and like my advice is just be well-rounded, like do it all and be well-rounded in your training also, you know. Like a lot of times guys are like, oh, I gotta learn this, I gotta learn that. It's like, man, you can't grapple without breathing through your mouth after like 3 minutes. Like that after 3 minutes. You gotta like get some running sneakers and go for a jog. You know what I mean? Like go get a bike and go for a bike ride, or, you know, buy some dumbbells and do like a little bit of interval training, some tabatas or something, so that you could teach your body how to move for 5 minutes, exploding and relaxing and not being super fatigued after like a 3-minute round, you know? I think so. Even that, guys try to solve a technical problem that's a physical conditioning problem, you know? Like, man, like training a little bit harder, like harden your body, train your body to train, and the technical aspect is gonna fall into place, I feel.
Makes a lot of sense. You know, I think it's, you know, one of the great quotes that I've always heard is if you want to know what to train, or if you're kind of stuck in your training, is imagine you were going to fight yourself. You know, what areas would you try to exploit against yourself? And those are the areas you got to kind of fix on yourself. So it's like you said, if you're gassing, maybe it's not your worm guard. Maybe you need to go for a run. So it makes a ton of sense. We're almost at the 1 hour mark, man. I can't thank you enough, but I wanted to ask you real quick, you know, once everything gets settled with the coronavirus and, you know, hopefully our new normal will eventually get back to the normal. Are you looking to compete again? I know you've been still pretty active. Once in a while, you jump out there and do compete, but is there something like, you know, I know that the ADCC does like Legends super fights and stuff like that. Is there somebody that maybe, you know, like a legend that you'd want to go against, or just anybody that, or any event that you'd, you know, be willing to step up and compete against again?
Man, I try to every year to get myself ready for the no-gi season, you know. So I think in the past like 5 years, I've done no-gi Pan Ams like 4 times. Last year I was on a surfing trip in Mexico and I tore my MCL, and man, like to be honest, it's been a bummer of a year for training. Like in August, I tore my MCL as I was starting to train. Like January, February, this whole thing happened with coronavirus. So it's like, man, like so my goal is to get ready for the no-gi season, do no-gi Pan Ams, and do no-gi worlds if I'm healthy, you know. Right. And yeah, of course, if like something happens with ADCC, I'm always down. Seth, every time they come to Philly or New Jersey, sends me a message, yo, Ricardo, you know, you want to fight to win. And I did one fight to win. It was so amazing, man. You know, it was awesome. I had like Frankie Edgar, Eddie Alvarez in my corner. Like all my students were there. And, you know, he had like, you know, the raised platform, the lights. It was so cool. I had a blast doing Seth's event. So I will definitely do that again. I will do an ADCC. Someone my age, I'll fight anybody in the world my age, bro. That's it. Anybody, anytime, as long as they're my age. That's it.
All right. Well, I'll put the word in. I got the seeds planted. So I know some guys. I'll talk to Seth. I'll talk to some of the ADCC people if it comes up, and we'll see what we can get started once this is all over. Man, I can't thank you enough. You know, you had some great stories. You shared some great knowledge with me. I'm actually going to, when I put this out, I'm going to add little clips of your ADCC matches. So when you're talking about it, we'll be able to see it, and it's going to look pretty cool. So I hope you get to check it out as well. Once again, Professor, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you kind of want to say maybe to the people out there, the jiu-jitsu community, before we log off here?
No, man, just keep your eye on the prize. Everyone that loves jiu-jitsu, you know, like we'll be back. We'll be back soon, and just keep training, keep building your body, keep forging your mind, and you know, when you get back to training, you should be stronger. Like if you come back to training like out of shape, that's on you, man. Like I'm gonna come back to training like in shape, like ready to take some scalps. That's for sure, and get ready for no DC. I'm not coming back like a bum that's been sitting on the cave hibernating. You know, like I'm coming back with a vengeance. So I hope everyone is taking this time to look at it that way. Ricardo, thank you so much, man. I love what you do. You're always so positive in everything that you put out. The guys at Flow Grappling, they do an incredible job. Like I love everything that they do. You know, I have my subscription, so thank you guys.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Professor, once again. Thanks, everyone, for watching and listening at home. And, guys, like you said, stay positive. We're going to get through this and just get your ass off the couch, start training because it'll be back. The jiu-jitsu will be calling and the mats will be calling sooner than later. So we'll be back in the gym sooner than you can think. So once again, guys, see you next time. Thank you so much. Till the next podcast.